that's not the way the world is nowadays, especially with personal information on the internet. And so helping people understand that what the problem is and how the problem developed is huge.
Hey, welcome to today's show. Today we have a new business associate, new friend, whatever category you're going to fit into, a Midwestern dude that I've met that's also happens to be a Special Forces veteran, Zach Rivera. Zach, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Otis. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I always love having another member of the regiment on with us to chat about various experiences, although yours are, considering I went to the last hard class, I know that your experiences were probably much different than mine. And speaking of that, I'd love to just kind of jump into something that's always one of my favorite things to ask, fellow members of the regiment is what's that one skill that you learned in SF that you're now applying in business?
I would say resiliency. Failure is okay as long as you learn from it. I know in SF, specifically the training, right? They would beat us into the ground to make us fail and to see who would quit with failure. And applying that in this, especially right now with COVID. I hate saying the word anymore, but it's a tough time. You have to be resilient and drive through that failure and keep going.
No, that's awesome, and because I know a little bit about you, I want to dive into that F word, which I don't particularly care for. There's two of them, feelings and failure. I hate both of them, but the one I want to talk about right now is failure, and you got the opportunity to go through selection twice. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, I loved it so much. I went through twice.
Yeah, I mean, not many people get that opportunity. I mean, that's pretty cool. So what happened round one that caused you to not meet the standard, if you will?
Yeah, that's a great question. Complacency was the biggest thing. So I was a very young man. I think I was about 21, 22 years old the first time I decided to go to selection. I was actually a support guy at 10th group, your lovely group right there, 2nd Battalion. Anyway, there was a bunch of SF
my old
guys.
Battalion, by the way, too.
Was it? Awesome. Bravo Company is where I was attached to, so I won't start diming people out because they're still around. But we were in Iraq, and the team that I was working with, they thought that I had what it took. And naturally, there's not a lot of places to ruck in Iraq. So I did what I could or what I thought was enough. And all the advice was, hey, just don't quit. Just don't quit. Keep trying, right? It's like, hey, that's it. That's all I need is to not quit. So I drove forward and I went to selection after I came back from the deployment. Went in July, which is probably the funnest time to go to selection in North Carolina. And it was brutal. It was insane, even after coming back from Iraq heat. And I survived 2 weeks before they involuntarily withdrew me. I didn't quit, but I was too slow. I was behind the pack. I said, you're done. Go home, train some more, come back. And went back, did some pre-mission training, went on another deployment back to Iraq. This time I was up north in Kurdistan, lovely place, and I was able to ruck a little bit more, fortunately. And I worked out for about three hours a day, at least, doing different rucks, runs, weightlifting, functional fitness, if you want to call it that, and prepared myself for the following July to return to selection, and had just a great experience that time around. It was still challenging, but I survived it a lot better.
So Zach, one thing you mentioned was about how when you go through courses like that, it's really, they want you to fail because they want to see how you fail and how you react to that. So in your opinion, how do you distinguish between failures that are catastrophic in the sense of, mission's over, we're done, or, I can't stay here anymore if you're getting kicked out, or something that's more just, okay, get back at it and go hit it again tomorrow morning? How can you distinguish between those two?
Yeah, that's great. I think it depends on the environment you're in. So if we look at selection in general, or the Q course, a catastrophic failure would be a physical one where you can physically no longer go and it's not safe, right? You're endangering yourself and others. And if we take a look outside of selection, say, hey, the business world, a catastrophic failure would be something that is endangering your livelihood, your job, or the company's reputation and the future of them having revenue. So, small failures outside of that are very acceptable, in my opinion, as long as you can learn from it. And I think that ties back into leadership giving you the opportunity to fail, but also having that safety net up where, if you fail, it doesn't mean the whole world's over and the company is going to tank and, you're going to freaking shoot somebody in the back of the head or anything crazy like that.
I think to me, it's something that, I've experienced with entrepreneurship. It's almost like, and, a good leader does this ahead of time, not to pat myself on the back. I don't want to do that. So I won't use myself as an example anymore, but you want to be able to look at the, 5 pieces or the 10 pieces that are critical to the success. And then as long as those aren't failing, then you're okay. And you can move forward and learn from those mistakes, on the second round on your business. And it's difficult sometimes to separate those because it can hurt your feelings a lot when things go wrong. When you get punched in the gut a few times by different companies you're working with, or, people you're working with, people you're trying to partner with, sponsors, anything like that, you can get punched in the gut all the time. But as long as you recognize that that's not actually hurting your product, what you're actually selling, and just kind of remember what you're selling and make sure that that's the piece that's still coming through there. Don't worry about all the fancy stuff that you're trying to sell on top of it to look nice. Worry about, okay, we're getting them from point A to point B. As long as we do that, it's okay. We'd like to have AC on the bus, but if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We're still getting them to point B.
Yes, absolutely. I think you're spot on with that.
Well, and as I was about to take a sip of coffee, I thought you were going forward with that, but I was just thinking the lesson learned there is you had an objective in mind, you had a goal in mind, and you stayed the course. Another way of looking at it, I like to talk about is beyond the goal is an outcome, and what's that outcome that you want from that goal? And because it's that outcome, you're allowed to take multiple paths, just like in the military when we go mission statements and we have an end state. We know what the end state is. We have a plan to get to that end state, but we also know if we're clear on that end state, what we can do. We can take alternate paths to get to that end state. And that's a great way to look at it and allow yourself to focus. And where else have you, I'm sure that kick in the gut from not making selection, not being asked to take a time out from selection is tough to replicate. But have you run across any other walls that have caused you to do a reset?
Yeah, tons of times. And I think it's important we back up for a moment and look at what you just said, Otis. We made that plan. We had this designed route, and it got to this end state. But how often have you seen that plan actually go through 100%? Like this is the plan. We're going to stick to it, and no deviations throughout the road to success. Personally, I haven't seen that happen, but maybe a handful of times, and they were small, very controlled environments. So I think that's huge to understand that once the feet hit the ground, whether that's in the military or in business or friendships, relationships, things are going to change, and being able to adapt and have also secondary plans to get to that end state is very important. So planning, even for your goals, huge, definitely underestimated.
Yeah, I think
one of my favorite quotes, Mike Tyson, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
Yeah, right? I've been punched many times. It goes right out the window.
I'll put my play on that for my Engage reference I was building too, because everyone has a plan until the 8-year-olds start running around. And because I've been doing Engage for a while, I miss it a lot right now. Coaching little kids rugby, we haven't been able to be out there in a while, but it's one of those where I would write these huge practice plans to go through all of this stuff. But then what's the real outcome? Yeah, I want them to learn how to pass, but the outcome is fun. They need to be running around and they need to be having fun, and that's really it. And if you get in there as a coach and you're too focused on skills, you're going to lose your kids, because you have to be able to recognize that they're not having fun with their situation. Now, not everything's fun. You still have to learn stuff. We're out there to learn. But you also have to realize that if they don't have the energy for that today, or more so, they have too much energy to sit in line and learn drills, then you have to be able to have that flexibility and move on. And again, kind of going back to the accountability and transparency of it, is you have to be able to have your team on the same page. That's where the big difference is. And if you as a head coach out there, to take my coaching example, if you're out there as a head coach and you understand that it's really just all about having fun, and you have a coach out there who is just drilling the technical side and just ruining that kid's day, then you're gonna have problems in your organization. You're gonna have 10 kids that wind up hating their practice and don't want to come back out because you forget what your outcome is and you wind up working around it.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate, and that tied into things in the military. It wasn't kids, but it was the same thing. It happened in the military, and it happens in the civilian world, and it happens in everyday coaching and mentorship and leading teams. Those different distractions that get you away from that, and the ability to not adapt, or the lack of ability to adapt, really. But yeah, well, I'll back up to answer your question, Otis. I think we got off on a little 30-second tangent. No big deal. Love it. I definitely love it. But yeah, challenges, adversity, right? I've come across a lot of barriers, everything in the military, through now my life as a civilian. When I was in the Q course, funny story, I had a bit of a smart mouth. You mentioned, the quote, everyone has a plan until you get hit in the face. I got hit in the face quite a bunch, quite a lot. I like to think it wasn't my fault. It was because I had, nice hair and everybody was jealous. But there was a couple times where I put myself in a situation. One time I was in language school, and I had broke the entire left side of my face, and I had to get recycled. I was in medical hold for a few months, had some surgeries. I just came back, started language school, and my mouth got me in trouble again. Young, dumb, out of control kid, and I was hit with a beer bottle on a nice Saturday morning, 10 a.m., minding my own business, or so I thought. But I had broke my jaw that time. So now, instead of recycling, because I would have been done, I continued to learn Arabic with my jaw wired shut for 2 months. My Arabic has never been the same, but it was that resiliency to drive forward, even with something like that. And we encounter those situations all the time where there's something that challenges us, whether it's training a team or what have you. But yeah, funny story.
Yeah. Well, have you learned that lesson? Does your mouth still get you in trouble?
Just with the wife and the kids now. I've calmed down a lot in my old age. So I learned a lot of lessons early. That's part of that failure, but adapted. I'm good now.
You've got me thinking of almost one of those where it's, as much as somebody else hits you in the face, you kind of put yourself in that situation. One of those where if you really step back, you start looking at the big picture. It's like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I should have done this. And, sometimes it's good to get hit in the face, I guess, right?
What was I talking about? There was a gentleman, I think it was my friend Steve, he was on LinkedIn the other day. He was talking about invincibility, or maybe it was Herb. One of them. Anyway, we got talking about invincibility and how we felt when we were young. And I definitely had that mentality that I was undefeatable and I could do whatever I wanted. And that mentality led to some huge mistakes. Fortunately, I was young and in America, and it didn't damage anybody other than myself.
That's a natural thing, though. We for some reason, we have a invincibility feature in our head, and then there's things that happen in life, either over time or an incident that changes our idea, our thought. And I'm curious, did you transition, or did you get hit with a 2x4, quite literally, to learn that you weren't invincible?
I think it was still a transition afterwards, right? Naturally, when your mouth's wired shut and you're trying to learn a second language, you're going to have a bunch of thoughts run through your head on what the hell did I do to get myself in this situation. But still that takes time to unlearn those bad habits and learn new habits and really change your entire mentality. And that, I think those mistakes and me taking that time to reflect really put me into a great position to grow as a young adult and become a better person overall and a more patient person. Honestly, now I take a second to think, pause, respond.
That was actually my question, because I have a couple buddies who just in rugby have broken a jaw and had it wired shut for a while, and that's the consistent story I've heard from them, is that they're so much quieter afterwards. They know when to shut up now, and they realize it's like, wow, I have my mouth wired shut for 3 months, and if you just sit there and look at people, they just keep talking, and you can learn so much about someone if you just sit there and look at them, because they'll just keep talking and keep talking.
Oh yeah, it's a fun game to play when the awkward pause comes up. And especially in the world of sales, right? Because salespeople love to ramble. If you just be quiet for a second, they're going to break the silence. They're going to say something, and now you can understand something more about them instead of just showing up and throwing up.
So it sounds like the prescription for American males about 22 to 23 is to break their jaw and wire their mouth shut for 3 months, and then they can reflect and become, make better decisions. Is that what you're saying? I mean, that's what I just heard both of y'all say.
Yeah, I think, hey, everybody, and I should say everybody, let me back up a minute.
Everybody should get their jaw broken at least once.
You should at least get hit in the face. Getting hit in the face teaches you a few lessons. I should say everybody gets hit in the face. You hit my little girls in the face, I'm going to hit you back. But there's definitely benefits that come from it. And you're not indestructible, but you're not extremely fragile either.
Mm-hmm. That's you just reminded me of doing my combatives when I was back at group, and that was one of the things that my good friend Mike Pick, when he was teaching us, Mike, Grandmaster of American Kempo, and what an honor it was to have him come down and train with us all the time, and he was adamant about it. No gloves, no pads, nothing, bare knuckle practice, and let me tell you. It's a great thing to learn, and there's a lot of analogy to that, in that you get punched in the face and well, that hurt, but I can still move forward. Just like selection, that hurt, but I can still do it again tomorrow. That sales call went like crap. I can change this and still do it again tomorrow. And it's a great analogy if you think about it. You get smacked in the face. You realize it didn't feel good, but you can still go back and still function. Yeah. You can still carry on, and I think that's a great thing. And I want to shift to something, your farm life, growing up on the farm, because I always find this interesting because there's some core traits, and I'm just curious if there's a trend here. So what traits did you learn being a farm boy that have carried through to through the military and now into business?
Yeah, I think you're onto something here. And I'll just clarify, just for everyone listening, I didn't grow up on a big, huge, wealthy ranch. Not that there are a lot of them out there anymore, but I was more of the family that worked for the farmers. They were all of my neighbors. We lived out in the middle of nowhere, and it was just something that we did. I think I started when I was 10 years old. My mom signed some paperwork, and I made $4 an hour. It was great. But that hard work and that just carried on. I learned from a very young age that you have to wake up early. You have to get out there. You want to make some money, especially without having an education. You better know how to work hard. And there's a lot of people that quit, and their parents enabled them to quit. Nowadays, here in Illinois, you can't be, I think, under 14 or 15 and work in the fields because we've had so many people get killed from, usually it's electrical things, from the irrigation systems and wet soil. There's been, unfortunately, a few deaths, but back then there was no safety things. We just went out in the fields and we worked all summer long, and it was a great opportunity to really instill some traits in me. And I think that those helped build the foundation that took me through the Q course, not just with walking, but with the mentality to be resilient. And then also looking at how I transitioned out and I went to sales. In sales, you have to have this entrepreneurial mindset, right? And you have to be able to keep going. You have to have the stamina. You got to have the ability to take the hits and keep pushing forward.
You know, you mentioned something there that I'd like to dive in on a little bit because I've been referencing it for a while. I'm almost done with the book, Dad, so I can make other references. But I've been reading Grit for a while, and one of the things they talk about there is passion, perseverance, and all these types of factors that help to identify people that are successful, and that most people who are successful have these types of traits. And one of the ones they're talking about when they talk about parenting for Grit is the idea that everyone needs to have some sort of extracurricular activity, whether it's working, athletics, whatever, and then the inability to quit. And that's where it comes from, because if you have the inability to quit, it helps teach you that resiliency over time. And so when you said that people's parents were allowing them to quit, that was a red flag to me. That it's like, when you allow that to happen, then you're allowing them to skirt away from their commitment. And instead, when you're young, you need to be teaching that kind of commitment of, you have to go out and you have to finish all these type of things, because there's really not that many other ways that you're going to get that type of commitment and resiliency, extracurricular stuff like that.
Yeah, that's huge. I do the same thing with my children. What you just tapped on, right? Build up that resiliency. So I put them in situations, safe situations, but where they have to push themselves through a mental challenge, through a physical challenge. And they're young. I know their limits, but they don't know their limits quite yet. Or they want to be, sticking that hand out. Dad, help me. Well, I'll help you a little bit here, but you got to help yourself. And you can't quit. Just you got to push your bike up, keep going over that next hill. You got to keep walking. You got to keep moving. You have to climb that rock. You can swim without those floaties. Believe in yourself. But yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we touched on that before. It's the idea that what we view, every single person, what we view as within our reach and what we view as within our capability in the big picture is so much less than what our real capability is. And you have to kind of break yourself out of that mold to recognize how successful you can be, how strong you can be, and all that kind of stuff. And I know my dad definitely is 100% a swim or die type teacher, but hey, it works, right? Because you get in there and you got to be resilient. You got to learn what to do and you got to bounce back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, son, if you'd quit panicking when I threw you off the dock into the lake, you would have realized you could have stood up. So,
yeah. That's funny.
But that's a great thing that you think about it. And that continue to push, continue to believe. You learn that to believe in yourself, that you can try something. And I think that's what you're experiencing right now, right? You left the military. How long have you been out of the military?
3 months.
3 months.
I've been out 3 months.
Yeah, so you're an old veteran now, right?
So the story goes.
Yeah. And you've dived right into business, and the more, what I think is a harder part in business, especially as a military transition, because in the military, what do we have? We have everything. You never run out of anything. We play the scarcity game, but you never run out. There's always more. There's always another dollar. There's always another bullet, right? And never run out. Now you're in business and everything is finite. There's only so much money. There's only so much this, only so much that. So I'm curious, in this transition, what's the resiliency that's driving you in this new business?
Yeah, if I take a step back and I look at how my transition transpired, so I took about a year away from the team when I came back to my final deployment. I went through this long self-discovery phase, and I had a bunch of nonprofits help me out. It was a great experience. But they helped build up this
nonprofits. Give those nonprofits a shout. Give those nonprofits a shout. Yeah.
The Honor Foundation. If anybody hasn't heard of them, I recommend you look them up right now and help them out there. They were the most impactful part of my transition and helped me significantly. They are huge. Anyway, besides them, there was Elite Meat, another great person, another great nonprofit. Military Talent Partners with Natalie Alverio. She's huge. American Corporate Partners, I got on board with them as well. And then there was a series of different mentorship, coaching, and self-drive that I took with different people as well. But yeah, it was huge, and the community's growing. Anyway, back to what I was saying, the nonprofits help build this foundation. And without that foundation, I probably would have quit and became a cop or something by now. Not that there's anything wrong with a cop, but that doesn't fit my personality traits and my characteristics, what I learned about myself. So now even with the struggle, right, because I exited right in the beginning of COVID, which was awesome. There's a lot of challenges. There's a bunch of freaking challenges, and selling is extremely hard. You have to be very different, unique about it, especially if people look at your product as a want, not a need. Even though I see it as a need, helping them see it as a need is challenging. But anyway, I would have quit had it not been for me having that foundation where I realized I am, one, entrepreneurial, but two, I'm extremely sales focused and business development focused. That is my personality type. I would not be happier doing anything else. In fact, this is probably one of the most stressful jobs out there, working at a late phase startup in a sales position that is selling a product people don't know about in a world that's struggling. And it's difficult. There wasn't a created system here. I came over and I'm creating the system. But it is not stressful at all. I'm the most relaxed I have been in my entire adult life. And my wife sees it, the family sees it. They don't know what the hell's going on. They don't know how to react. Dad let me have ice cream all the time. This is weird. He's making jokes. Yeah.
So why are you in a less, I mean, quite frankly, and I think you talked around it, but you didn't come right out and say it. Sales is a stressful position. So how are you able to be in this, what most people are like every sales guy I've met, even the good ones, they carry a lot of stress because they're thinking they got to hit their numbers and they got to do this and they got to do that. And so what's your secret? How are you staying calm through the sales storm?
Well, I'd say my background had a big part to do with that, right? So I just said I'm significantly less stressed. The stress is still there, but it's nothing compared to what it was like on all of those fantastic deployments. Like, no one's going to die today if I don't sell. Nothing's going to happen. I still have food in the fridge and beer on the table, lights on at the house. Everything's great. But outside of that background, I leverage my network. I have coaches, I have mentors, I have a strong support system. I'm able to go into different rooms where I'm now not the smartest guy, and I'm able to leverage all of that knowledge, build relationships, and redefine my personal brand and drive forward with all of that experience and all of that knowledge that I gained from everybody else. And it's just, I'm not alone. That's the biggest thing. I'm not alone.
One thing you touched on that I think I would kick myself we didn't dive into a little bit more, because I think it's a fascinating type of area, is on the marketing side of the want versus need, and how it's just a very different side of the marketing. We have an agricultural background, and I've tried to sell people food. It's easy. Hey, do you eat? I got food for you. Very, very simple translation. Hey, you have bell peppers? I grew bell peppers. Let's go. It's a very simple conversation. But what you're talking about there is more of the want. It's the icing on top of the cake and all that. So I would love it if you could dive in a little bit more about trying to sell as a want versus a need, or trying to convince people that it is a need and not just a want.
Yes, I think that's the big problem right there. Is a lot of people view it as a want where it is a need. So what the company is, it's 360 privacy. And we remove people's personal information from the internet, from people finder sites and data aggregator sites. So unless somebody has been targeted, harassed, extorted, stalked, spearphished, any of these different variations of attacks, then they see it as, I don't need that. I'd like to have that, but I don't need that. That's like saying, well, I don't need locks on my doors because no one's broken in. I think it's the same kind of concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
So having them understand,
a lot of us grew up in neighborhoods where, you didn't lock the doors, right?
But windows were open, doors were unlocked.
Until somebody got something stolen, right?
Yes.
Then it's like everybody locking the doors, right?
Yeah, especially where I grew up out in the middle of nowhere. Nothing was locked, ever. But that's not the way the world is nowadays, especially with personal information on the internet. And so helping people understand that what the problem is and how the problem developed is huge. So there's literally everybody out there is selling, Otis and Cam's personal information. Florida DMV, not that whereas in Florida, every state does this, but I think Florida DMV made the most money last year selling personal information. It was almost about just under $80 million. So everybody from your shopper loyalty card to the people you pay your bills through, to your DMV, to the places that run your credit score. They sell your information quick, fast, in a hurry, and they make a lot of money off it. It's the way they make most of their money. It's not by saying, "Hey, subscribe to our service, and we'll tell you what your credit score is." So, "Hey, subscribe to our service, fill in some more information so I can sell it." But understanding that information, all of this, right, your social security to your assets, to even the things you keep in a trust that you think aren't attributable to you, especially if your trust isn't in your name, they're all tied to you and they're all on the internet. I could go online right now, find out, what Otis's mortgage is, who it's through, what his taxes are, and his social security number, his phone number, his wife's name, his mother's last name, the street you grew up on, all these things, and build a very sophisticated attack to you. And I think, how much was it? Social engineering cost the U.S. About $2.3 billion just in businesses every year. Anyway,
that's the revenue. That's the revenue they're generating off of personal information. Is that
off
of
right? Social engineering just in businesses? Wow. You're looking at $2.3 billion. I think a couple of years ago, 2018, there was about $13 million that was taken from Americans, and about $600 billion in losses. I'm sorry, there's 13 million Americans affected and $600 billion in losses in 2018
Wow. Oh, like you mean like in fraud cases where they're
in fraud cases?
Okay.
Yeah, so not just businesses, but every American.
So one piece of that, and we want to, of course, get into more of the, how you go about it and how your business works in that sense.
Yeah.
But one thing that has me thinking right away is, because I'm all about incentives, that's my favorite buzzword, is when you have something that big of a market, is it something that, in your opinion, that you can successfully, I guess, fight in the way that you are, or is it something where it's more so needs a little bit of reworking? Like, just as a for instance, if my data is worth $10,000 and they're out there selling it, can we rework a system? You sell my data for me, I get $5,000 out of that, we split the difference. Or you know what I mean? How it's something where it's so entrenched in such a large system. Do you think it's something where you can successfully intervene inside that business?
Yeah, we have successfully intervened in that business. The trick is, well, there's two different verticals in there, right? There's the public information, and there's the law enforcement side. So naturally, we don't interfere with the law enforcement side because that's going to be used to catch some very bad guys. But the public information, until there's some regulations put out by our government, we're not going to change anything. The companies aren't going to change the way they handle our privacy information. Even with what's going on right now, they just notify you. All they have to do is notify you what they're doing with the information. You have to bless off on it. And everyone clicks accept, acknowledge, I acknowledge. No one cares. But
who the hell's going to read all that fine print? I can tell you that.
Not a lot of people. And even the places that sell this information, if Otis wants to go on and take it down, they're going to make you pay for that. So they're going to make money either way. And that's where we come in, because we're able to do that. We have some high-speed avenues of approach to get in and get this information down very quickly, sometimes in as short as 24 hours, typically no longer than 72, depending on the website. And it's very effective. And that's why we have to run this daily. I think, Cameron, you touched on it, right? What's effective? And essentially, as soon as you remove this information, somebody's going to repost it. Or you go back out and you get a new Kroger's shopper loyalty card or renew the registration on your car. It's repopulated. So then we have to take it back down. So we scrub the information, purge the information, and look all over the internet daily. And we're constantly building our site bank to where this information's at. Yeah.
So we kind of touched on this. As this grows and continues into the future, do you think it's something where your business is going to be able to come in and continually do this and, you know, put a dent into that side of things until there is some more, sort of, you know, more like legislative type changes? Or do you think it's something where really, you know, this is the solution, this is the long-term thing where it's people are going to wind up, you know, whether it's you or another business paying for this and being more proactive on it and treating it as a need, not a want?
Right. I think this is a little bit of both. Like, this is what you have to do until there is some regulation out there. But even afterwards, you know, if somebody can make more off of selling your information than what the fines are. So I think right now, California, the California Consumer Protection Act, for every incident of a breach where information is taken out and violated, it's $7,500. So if the company has, you know, several hundred breaches, that's a lot of money. But, you know, eventually they'll start getting that under control, and there'll be more regulations in more states, but they're just going to change the name of the game at that point. And so our business model will have to change as more legislation comes in. But hopefully I answered your question. I feel like I went off in a different angle.
No, I mean, what I was going to say on that is, you know, it reminds me, we were talking about with Devon about policy and how policy, it can wind up being really ineffective if it's not geared properly, you know, doesn't use the proper language like that. Like we were talking about farming and how you could say, well, I'm going to help family farmers. Well, my family farm works for Tyson. What are you going to do now? Like these type of issues. And I can totally see how, especially in the technology side, there's so many different examples, but I can assume that from what you're talking about, it's such a deep realm of the language barriers and all these type of stuff to where the policy is really, really lagging behind, even worse than other technological areas.
Well, look how fast technology is developed. It's crazy just to see that spike in that ramp, specifically over, you know, the past 5-10 years or the past year, and legislation, you know, regulations. How fast have those come on board? How fast do those change? The two are not parallel at all. So yeah, there's this solution, in my opinion, is the best solution out there. And there are competitors out there. And I laugh because I looked up their employees and where they keep the information. So, you know, Cam goes online. He says, well, I want to remove this stuff. And you pay somebody, you know, their rate. One, they touch maybe 60, 70, 90 websites. We touch over 250. But also they have employees in India and Russia and Iran. And their servers are in the cloud. So now your information is back in the cloud, which is able to be hacked. So they can go online and say, hey, this politician signed up for this to remove these things, and this is where his information is. Now they just have an expedited route to find out what's out there. Whereas we're not in the cloud and we're not 100% automated, and we're proud of that. You know, sometimes automation isn't the solution, and a white glove service is. Anyway.
Well, like a self-looking ice cream business model for some of your competition, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes sense. So common folk, normal people, if you will, that aren't famous or rich, what's their concern? I mean, it makes sense if I'm a highfalutin, famous, you know, I've got like 1 million followers on Instagram or whatever like that. It makes sense that I want to do it. I want to, you know, I'm really concerned about my information being out there. But for the rest of the world, the other 99%, if you will, to use that terminology, well, why is it important to us?
Where's the tipping point? That's the way I was going to put out a question down. Where's the tipping point? You know, how much money do I have to make before I give you a call?
Well, unfortunately, most Americans have less than $500 in even a savings account. Was it like 80% of Americans? So financially, we're not in the best, or most Americans aren't, you know, prepared to handle something like this. And I would hate for someone to take food away from their table to buy this, you know, if it's not an immediate threat for them. We are working on a solution for the middle market, right? That's where a lot of people are. It wouldn't be as depth as, say, you know, a service that Beyonce would sign up for, which if she wants to sign up for, she should totally call me. But, you know, outside of that,
she's a listener too, right?
I know she is. She's a big subscriber. I found that out online when I looked up her information. Anyway, if you, I'll have to tell you a story offline about the mayor of Minneapolis when I called him. Anyway, we back up and we look at what we can do with these the normal Americans, the everyday Americans, and preventative measures are definitely essential. A lot of people just subscribe for everything, sign up for everything, don't review anything. They have weak passwords. They have the same password for 75 different things. They access public Wi-Fi on a regular basis. They leave the Bluetooth open on their phone to airdrop to their friends, accessible to everybody. There's everyday measures that we can do to really help mitigate the risk. And, a simple thing like when someone posts a security question, right, for Google, instead of saying what your mother's real maiden name is, how about you say something that only you would know? Or instead of saying what street you grew up on, say the third or fourth or fifth street that your grandmother grew up on, or the street over. There's different things that you can do to make things that are less guessable. Instead of saying, hey, my favorite color is black. I grew up on Main Street and my grandmother's maiden name was Smith, just because it's easy to remember now. Somebody goes in, they hack, and you have the same password for 75 accounts, and that's what happens, and you're done. But unfortunately, our senior citizens and our youth are the two most targeted, and that's because they create weak patterns that are very accessible.
One thing that it sounds like, and I kind of wanted to hammer this down because it's something I've heard. Yeah. I've heard some from other people in the special forces background, and there's some phrase that I'm going to butcher because that's become my thing, is paraphrasing people and ruining it. But the idea that the best thing to defeat an evil man or an evil person is a good person who's better at the evil things, right? And that's not violent. Is violent the word, not evil? There is that the. Because you're looking at me, because I know that's a quote. I've heard it a lot.
Yeah, you're close. I think I know what you're talking about.
So the idea, I'll just skip past that and act like I got it right. The idea is then how much in your business is it like being the best hacker to defend people from the hacking type side of things? Because the way you're talking about it, it's almost like, oh, I could get your information like that, which is why you would be the best person to then protect their information. Is that correct?
That is correct. I think that's what you were paraphrasing is definitely essential in different areas. Whether you want to talk about hackers, right? You have ethical hackers. You have people that make great livings that work for the government, banks, financial institutions, pro sports, all these things, and they're very good at hacking. And they focus on doing red hat things, right? So they play the bad guy and they go in and they improve the system so that it's not completely accessible. And we do the same thing. No, I'm not the brains behind the operations at 360. Definitely, Adam, our founder, he developed his child, and he is extremely smart when it comes to all of this. And he has, in a true Green Beret attitude, decided to use his knowledge to help others. And my mind has been blown. Last week we came across this young lady, and she was sexually assaulted as a younger lady. And something resurfaced thanks to the internet. And the way the internet works, lots of fun people out there that hide behind and like to stalk and harass, not just her, but now her family. So, we'd love to do pro bono work like that. And that's why we have these kind of things. So we can go out there and help people for free that need this. So it's very, very, very happy to see that her and her family are now protected. And we were able to go on and remove almost all information, even on sites that are outside of our scope, on her behalf to protect her.
Well, I want to kind of follow on Camden's flubbed quote, and
are you going to get the quote right, or just make fun of me?
Well, it's just a very likely genetic thing because I flub out quotes all the time. But what it reminds me of is a bit of a Sun Tzu sort of thing of, know your enemy as you know yourself, right? And and the only way to know the bad guy is to get in bed with the bad guy. I mean, to truly understand that. And without getting into your proprietary processes and things like that, is that an area that y'all are are delving into with the dark web and all those other sort of things that we hear about.
Yeah, we are.
Most of us don't know anything about those things.
The dark web's hard. It's a difficult place to go and to take things down. Because typically, if something is for free, or not for free, for sale on the dark web, it's probably already been milked for what it's worth. And now if I go start probing around in the dark web and someone sees that I'm looking for, Camden's information, and I start pinging it, they're going to start jacking up that price, and they're going to realize it's worth more value. The dark web's a hard place, but we are moving into the dark web. We have a partner with the dark web, and we're going to roll out some solutions here shortly. But the dark web is a very, very dark, scary place.
Is that kind of the golden egg in your sort of business of like, if you could solve that, it's like, oh wow, now we are the guys, this is the best, the best proprietary operation that you could have if you're able to shut that down, sort of thing?
Personally, I think we're already the best, just because of our capabilities versus our competition.
Not current best, but potential wise best.
Potential best. Yeah, it's just the dark web is just a very challenging, wicked place. And our partner, I don't want to dive too deep into it before we have this thing ironed out, because I don't want to make promises that I can't fulfill in 6 months. But the intent is for us to go online very secretly and remove or purchase back this dark web information. I'm not sure if you saw the news 2 weeks ago, I believe. The law firm up in New York, it was an entertainment law firm, and they sent some ransomware into this law firm. So they stole all this stuff about all these celebrities and politicians and said, hey, if you want it back, you have to pay us X amount of money. And I said, here's an example of everything that we have. And one of the people that had information on was President Trump. And they said, it's on the dark web. That stuff was purchased very quickly. So maybe that was purchased by some actors on his behalf. Maybe it was purchased on people who have some ill intentions. I guess time will tell. But if you want Madonna's information, she's on there too.
I think it would be useful just for the sake of this conversation, because Dad, you're right. Most people don't know much about this. Could you give just a short little, minute or two excerpt about what makes it so different? What makes it, because I mean, dark web to me is almost just a buzzword if I'm talking about internet things like this. It doesn't really conjure up more, anything actual or, real references as to what makes it so different, besides the fact that it sounds so scary.
It does sound scary, right? Dark web, man, it's intense. And
sounds like a science fiction movie in itself, doesn't it?
Exactly.
It does. You go on and everybody's wearing cloaks. And it was essentially, that's what it is. So I'm by no stretch of the imagination the world leader of knowledge on all things privacy and dark web. But from what I understand, and hopefully some people can jump on and shoot some hate mail to me, is you go on the dark web, right? You're shooting through all these different little loopholes and portals and bouncing off all these different servers, and it eventually becomes so non-attributable that you log on to this one little specific one, and you're able to communicate with these people and see what they have for sale and purchase. Usually it's through the exchange of digital currency, because that can be non-attributable as well. But if you do that same route enough times, that's how you can figure out where someone is coming to the dark web. So you can find people on the dark web. The government does it all the time. Law enforcement agencies do it all the time. Bad actors know how to do it as well. But it's essentially, imagine everybody standing around in cloaks because they went around through all these different doors, putting on black clothes to get to where they are. Yeah.
Okay. Well, one last one I wanted to get in there as we're talking about this, because you did have some financial benchmark references. What kind of, because we were talking about the regulatory growth versus the market growth, really, to call it that. What kind of market growth have you seen in the identity theft world? Is it still just like skyrocketing with technology? Is it something that's flattening out a little bit? What does that trajectory look like?
It is skyrocketing right now thanks to COVID, everybody being at home, and everybody's bored. Fortunately and unfortunately, pro sports aren't going on right now. But let's say everybody's sitting at home, bored, COVID, watching things happen. Like the gentleman on NASCAR, right? He was doing streaming, and everyone sits at home. He throws out that racial slur that he did, and everybody logs onto their computer, finds out where his home is for $5, and now they can send him flaming bags of shit for real cheap. Yeah, so the price just goes up. It's just the information is very cheap. but what the damage can do to you that's the expensive part.
Right.
Yeah, I never thought about that, but that is, you always read when something happens, like the Central Park lady and the gentleman, with the dog and the bird watching and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, these people, they start getting like death threats and stuff like that. And I've always been like, wow, how the hell do these people know where they're at? And you're right.
Zach's telling them.
All their stuff is online. I mean,
was it? Who was it? There was a news anchor. I'm trying to think. Tucker Carlson, right? He was on air, and he was at home, and this was back when the Antifa thing was going on, and the Antifa members attempted to break down his door at his house while he was online talking to people and spray painted symbols on his driveway, and they found his home address online, and then they started posting it on other different sites, and then they started sharing information about his brother and his college roommates. So this stuff it's scary. It's scary. I could go online right now and see all the information on all of your relatives, all of their neighbors, all of your neighbors. It's very important to take it down, in my opinion.
Great sales pitch.
Yeah, there you go, man. I'm scared.
Yeah. I'm scared. I will forever have this service, and I will make sure that my daughters have this before they go and start venturing off into college.
Yeah. Man. Well, hey, Zach, I really appreciate you taking time out of the day today, man. It's been educational and kind of scary, but I'll bounce back anytime I talk to anybody about stuff out on the web. I always go, oh my god, yeah. So to bring it back to a positive sense, I'm going to go first with what I learned, Camden, because you don't get to go first this week. It is, and for me, I'm a little long in the tooth, but a lot of times what I learned is like, oh yeah, that's a good one. And this week is one of those, and it's that it takes time to unlearn. The getting hit in the face. It's the how many times you're going to touch the hot stove until you learn that the hot stove burns your hand, and how many times you're going to get punched in the face in the bar for being a smartass. It takes time to learn new habits, and some people learn them quicker than others, depending on to use Camden's incentive, what the incentive is to learn something new. But yeah, that's mine. Zach, how about you? What'd you learn today?
Yeah, great question. And thanks to Camden, I learned about also the resiliency in his coaching, right? And the ability to adapt, but also how that is no different than what we did in the military, right? At a foundational level versus what we're doing in the civilian world. And it's very important that we have a very like-minded approach as leaders, with whether it's, small children or small teams.
Camden, what'd you learn?
So that last little tidbit that with COVID-19 and everything going on with that's caused a surge in the identity theft, and that's just skyrocketed. That's something I hadn't put together. I love it's just because it's such an interesting situation. Nothing normal about it. That I love getting into the hidden benefits and costs of this type of thing. Whether it's the air pollution from no one driving their cars or whatever type of little things that add up and we don't think about. That's another one that hadn't been on my radar that I think is super interesting. That because people are just at home and they're bored and they're just spending all their time online. That just means the market is opening up as far as the identity theft goes.
Awesome. Well, Zach, how can if people want to learn more about 360 privacy, what's the best way to find out, contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. I recommend going to our website, 360privacy.com. You can also shoot me an email, Rivera@360privacy.com. If you don't know how to spell the last name, it's like river with an A. Okay, very simple. You can also look me up on LinkedIn, linkedin.com//Zachary Rivera. You can look for the beautiful hair.
And they could just Google your name and get your address and send you some mail, right?
Well, after you go to Google, you got to click on some links, pay some money, but good luck finding me.
That's great.
Well, and I was going to say something about that hair. I'm kind of surprised you ended up in the Green Berets and not the Navy SEALs with hair like that.
I get that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I bet you do. Camden, run us out.
All right. Thanks, y'all, again for listening to today's show. Special thanks to our guest, Zach Rivera, for joining us today, and our sponsors, MASH, Military and Athletic Strength Hemp Oil, and Verbi Virtual Fundraising. You can check out recent episodes of The Cam and Otis Show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, and check out a full archive at thecamandotishow.buzzsprout.com. The Cam and Otis Show is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thanks again. We'll see y'all next week.